Hi, and welcome to Seat Meets Table, the podcast that brings people together. I am your host, Sam O'Hara-Childs, and in the seat today is Rob Tilsley. Hi Rob, how are you doing today?
I'm good, thank you, Sam. How are you?
I'm very well, thank you.
Good.
I'd like to begin by asking, do you think everyone has rhythm at some level?
That's a very deep question, because I guess we could get into the weeds of...
Sure, why not?
Get into the weeds. I think it is possible to be somewhat arrhythmic.
You think it's possible?
I think it's possible.
You've seen some people on the dance floor and thought, yeah, there's no rhythm there.
I don't know if it's the rhythm's not there, or if it can't come out, but it's so rare that it is practically impossible. So I'd say you're right, that everyone has rhythm.
Right.
Really. But... with that, just a little asterisk in the end, just being like
small asterisk.
Perhaps there's people, I may have seen indications that that it can happen,
right?
Whereas maybe it's felt, but it doesn't get expressed in a rhythmic manner.
But that could be, I suppose, a confidence thing as well.
It could be that, yeah.
In terms of letting yourself loose and giving into self-expression, that can be, inhibitions can be a barrier there as well.
Absolutely, and is arrhythmic not a type of rhythmic?
Yeah, almost like a fashion trend.
Yeah. So
going the opposite direction, it actually ends up becoming, rhythm.
So I'd say it depends what's underlying your question. Is it? Would you asking it? Should anybody have a go at rhythm and be able to enjoy themselves, or are we saying scientifically, is it like a fundamental is it always there with every human?
I guess we'll go with the scientific version.
I mean, we've all got a heartbeat, unless you've got one of those machines that is a pump. But I mean, there's a rhythm there, and we've all got brain waves that are rhythmic. So swinging back towards yes, we all have rhythm.
All right.
Okay.
What is ethnomusicology?
So it's a study. It's an academic study. So you'd be looking at music and how it fits into a place and a time. So. My little snippet of ethnomusicology was going to Ghana in 2007, where I stayed in a place called Cape Coast, and I was to do with this group who were providing music for different occasions, and I had to put on this hat of ethnomusicology and be like, what's happening here? Why is it happening? And I really enjoyed it. I didn't actually go forward with it. It could have been an MA type option, but I kind of steered back slightly from it. But what I have kept doing is applying things that I learned from that time to the work that I do.
Do you think music builds bridges across cultures?
I would say yes. So I have been fortunate enough to do some work with refugees and asylum seekers.
Right.
Some musical work. So we had a group of people from all over the world who ended up in this country. And it was sometimes jarring, the fact that you could have this musical connection with everyone in a room and do that. But then when you wanted to converse in a very simple manner, you'd get completely stuck. So I would say that's an argument to say that we definitely have these connections. People say it's a universal language, and I can see that is true to at least some degree. Although, having said that, there's some music which to unfamiliar ears would sound very strange, and that is true of our music as well to other people. Yeah,
there could be some, I don't know, some industrial type music maybe that people would think that's totally bizarre, or Aphex Twin you could play to someone, they think what is that? That's not music, or whatever it might be.
Absolutely. So I mean, opera.
Sure, it's pretty dramatic. Yeah,
it's familiar to a lot of people. You might have heard it, but would you listen to it and be like, "Oh, yes"? Maybe you would. Maybe you wouldn't. But
some maybe. Yeah.
You might think, "What on earth is going on?" If you come from another culture, you'd never heard opera before.
Yeah, it's just sounds, supremely dramatic sounds,
and you can't know what they're saying. Maybe that would matter, or maybe it wouldn't.
Yeah. Well, I think opera is maybe one of those things that could perhaps be universal because the sound is so impactful. It's so dramatic. You kind of just tap into the sound more than the words, really. That's the idea of it, I think. They say plot and dialogue doesn't really matter in opera. Even the lyrics, it is just literally the sounds being boomed out.
Well, I mean, I guess that's one aspect of music. Like, I had a friend at university, and he listens to lyrics first. That was the thing that mattered to him in music.
Yeah, I've met some people like that.
Yeah, so they'd be reading lyric books if the lyrics were inaudible, but that was lyrics first. Whereas I listen to a song 1,000 times, and I don't know what they're saying.
Sure. Yeah.
And then someone will say, they say this in this song, and you think, I've never actually listened to the words before. I've just been listening to the textures and the rhythms and the,
Yeah, I think I'm like that. I generally go for the sounds more than anything else. And people say, what about these lyrics? And I'm like, I didn't really take in those lyrics at all. It's just, it's how it moves me, the sounds.
Yeah, I think what you're saying is absolutely bang on, because there's some very strange to our ears music, but you can still have that kind of, the expression in the voice can still mean something, even if you don't know the context of what's being sung. Because, it could be a song that sounds sad, that's actually melancholy, or it's actually, there's all kinds of layers you might miss out on if you don't actually know what someone's singing and why. And that's going back to ethnomusicology. Why music? Why are we playing music? What's...
Sure. And the human drive to create sound, I suppose, as well, that's shared across the world.
Yeah, there's not a culture without music.
Yeah.
It's never happened. And I don't think I think it's language and music are absolutely universal. And
probably things like bread or cheese. Everyone's got a bread.
Do they, though? What about people who lived in very cold places? Could they farm wheat and make bread?
Yeah, I suppose that's a good point, yeah. Inuits or something like that probably haven't got bread.
They may not have. We'll have to find out.
Yeah, that'll be my life's mission. Who's the best drummer of all time, in your opinion?
See, that is... We're talking about easy and difficult questions here to a degree, and that is a supremely difficult question. And I think it's... A lot of people would say somebody like Buddy Rich, because he was famous on the drum set for playing very fast, flashy, exciting solos, well regarded. But the music I've seen from West Africa, the talent of the instrumentalists is absolutely phenomenal. And who are we going to say that Buddy Rich is better than someone who's doing something that's arguably more complicated? And if we take the Indian classical music as another example, that is said to be the most complicated...
It seems like it.
...non-Western music in the entire world. And yeah, absolutely, they've got vast sequences, and they don't just have beats, they've got different strengths of beats. So you won't have a bar of like 4/4. You could have a bar of like 100 and something, where it's like strong, weak, mute, strong. It's like this whole sequence, and then they'll play polyrhythm in relation to that.
Yeah, very, very dense. Sounds dense.
So that's taken a completely different level. Well, is it a different level? I think it's so subjective.
But have you seen someone? Maybe if I had to press you, like it could be a Ghanaian person you saw drumming when you were out there, you thought that guy is exceptional.
Well, my master drummer was called Nana, and he was so young. There was this. I think there's this definite like time warp aspect that I experienced in Ghana. Like I was 20 something, early 20s, and Nana was in his late 20s or early 30s, and he had many children, but he wasn't actually that much older than me, so it kind of felt a little bit surreal.
Sure.
That I was like, well, what have I done? I haven't done anything yet, and this guy's had his whole life already, and he's only a bit older than me. But he was exceptional. But then he had people he looked up to as well.
Sure.
And what is fast technicality the thing we want to aspire to? What about the feel? What about the composition that may take place? Maybe be that improvised or set down. Would you want to say Aphex Twin is the best drummer of all time, even if he's never hit a drum for real? Because the drum programming of Aphex Twin is exceptional. Same can be said for many other electronic artists.
Well, I love the White Stripes, and people always said, Meg White's terrible, but for me, with their music, it was the feel of it. It was that stripped down blues approach. That's what I loved about it. So, of course, there's subjectivity to it as well. I don't know. It's how it moves the person, isn't it? It's how you feel about it. So you can't really pick one, is what you're saying.
Yeah.
Fair enough. Which is your favourite rhythm or tempo, if you had to pick one?
Oh, gosh. So hello, Caesar. So the Afro-Brazilian music I've looked at over the years includes types of music called candomblé maracatu, bayal, samba, things like this. They're quite fast. They've got a particular swing. It's not like a jazz swing. There's a kind of rhythmic push and pull within the phrases. It's so funky. And I feel like it took me quite a few years to actually get my head around how to produce that, because you're kind of going intentionally out of time.
Right.
But then pulling it back. You always know exactly where you are, but you're adding this kind of flavour through the particular swing. So I'd say something like maracatu, just it's interesting. It was foreign to my ears when I was first learning it. It became this kind of mission, I guess, to try and get my head around this to swing.
Try and master it.
And they call it jinga. It's one of the expressions for what this kind of swing is. So I feel like whenever I hear that, I get it does something internally to me. Like it makes you really feel excited by the rhythm, and just it's something irresistible about it as well.
Okay, and it's music made to dance to, basically.
Yeah, I mean, what you will find that because that music came from Africa, music, dance, and song are very rarely apart from each other. In Africa in general. Not to say it doesn't ever get split up. I was just teaching a rhythm yesterday where actually there typically isn't singing. Sometimes it's, but I mean, yeah, generally it's all together. And
it's heavily woven into society, isn't it, in terms of events? Could be rituals as well, big occasions.
Oh, see, now you're thinking like an ethnomusicologist.
Well, just from that angle as well.
It might not be what you expect, but I mean, I'd say in the Afro-Brazilian instances I looked at, it'll be quite often based around festival.
Yeah, coming together.
Pancake Day for us,
sure.
You know.
Yeah.
So there will be marked occasions where music is played. But when I went to Ghana, for instance, I kept asking people when I first arrived. I kept being like, "Oh, so you do drumming?" You know, I was like, "Is it like a national? Is it as popular as football?"
You assumed everyone's a drummer, sure.
And they're like, "Oh no, I did it in school for like a few years, but I don't really." It was like recorder,
right? You know? Okay, fair enough.
So of course, there's like specialized interest in it. I guess like, another analogy I was thinking of was like bagpipes or something. Where there's Cornish bagpipes, aren't there?
Yeah.
And
kilts as well.
So is it like that to those people? So what is maracatu like for the people of the place that it's from? Because we were talking about layers earlier. There's a lot of layers to maracatu. So it was indigenous, it was African culture going to South America under the Portuguese rule, and they couldn't worship their own deities. So they actually sort of layered theirs onto Christian ones. And then there's all these different angles of what they were really doing with that music, celebrating their own things with the face of another thing.
Sure, yeah.
And there's a lot to it. So what? Yeah, I mean,
it sounds like it.
And if you lived in that culture, would you just, look out the window occasionally and be like, oh yeah, they're doing a festival? Or would you be out there, again. Just, is everyone just flooding on the street there, just sort of, joining in?
Sure.
And,
What makes a great drum?
You're making me think about like the full spectrum of drums here. So we were just talking about Afro-Brazilian culture. So there's a small drum in samba and some of the related forms called timborim. I got that wrong, haven't I? Tamborim. Tamborim. So it's like teacup. What's that? Saucer.
Saucer?
It's like saucer-sized drum.
They're very small. Super small.
Yeah.
Right, yeah.
And they've just got this way of cutting across the rhythm. So in a samba procession, you might have like tens of people playing these kind of saucer-sized drums in their hands, and talking about the swing. Actually, they've got a beautiful swing that they'll put on some of these rhythms, and they're very intricate polyrhythms and very energetic starts and stops and specialized calls that happen on this drum. So it's the tiniest. It's one of the smaller drums you can think of, and it's got a character. And it's interesting, and it's just barely anything beyond a tiny bit of metal and a small bit of plastic stuck over the top. And then I was just thinking about like the other side of things, the biggest drums that I can think of. There's a drum called a chimavu in Ghanaian culture, which is typically 6 to 9 feet tall.
Wow. Bigger than a man then, really. It's huge.
You play it on a stand, and you might be standing on something. So it's like leaning over, and you're like playing on the top, standing on a chair or a ladder or something like this. And in taiko drumming in Japan, they've got drums that have got a diameter of 4 meters or so. And you play with basically like rolling pins.
Yeah.
And so everything in between those two extremes.
Huge variety.
Yeah. Everything's got a character. So I think my favourite drums are the most characterful ones.
Like a distinctive sound, you mean?
Well, I mean, I'll just take, for instance, I've learnt a few pieces from the Ashanti region of Ghana, which is kind of the central region, and they've got these drums called atumpan, which is it's a paired drum. So there's a male and a female drum, and they're quite large as well. They're not as big as the Achimavu, but they're quite big drums. They've got kind of hourglass shapes, and they're leant over, and they used to talk between different villages with these drums because
sending news.
Yeah,
right.
You can actually
almost like Morse code.
Somewhat similar, yeah. Because
interesting.
They've got a tonal language, so that you can actually reproduce the language on the drums. So
fascinating.
You can actually communicate, and you can send messages vast distances with them. And it's not the bassiest sound. We were talking about those giant taiko drums. They've got really like something that really shakes your core, like it really gets down there. But the atumpan have got like a lovely voice, and it is very powerful. So I like that drum. But I mean, it's again, I'm being shown up to be not good at making decisions here, am I? The Achimavu that I mentioned, I'll pick that. I'll make a decision
because it has character.
Yeah. So the character of the Achimavu is kind of thunderous. So I was saying about the sheer scale of it. So when you get a bass tone out of that drum, that does shake you a bit like a taiko drum,
right?
But it's also got this thunderous kind of like if you play a slap tone on it, it is not abrasive.
Primal?
Yeah, primal. Yeah, maybe primal, but yeah, you absolutely feel it like a crack of thunder. Wow. And then it's almost got like the subsonic things happening as well that you can kind of sense, but you can't actually hear because it's below our normal range of hearing.
So you kind of feel it at a visceral level, but not at an audible level.
Well, it's everything all at once.
Yeah. Right. Multi-sensory.
Yeah, and it's another thing that I'd never heard anything like it before. So growing up in this country, I've heard snare drums, bass drums, orchestral bass drums, timpanis, all these types of things. I've never heard anything like an Achimavu, being absolutely played hard.
Sure.
And another thing about it is that the drums, they've got animal skins, and that is affected by the temperature. So in Ghana, it's like 40 degrees in the shade on an average day.
Yeah.
I mean, it does vary from place to place there, but it is intense. So those animal skins actually sound different in the heat than they do here.
Interesting.
Because you can't actually raise the pitch. They're tunable with the pegs.
Unless you play them in a sauna.
Yeah, I guess you could play them in a sauna.
Crank it right up.
That might work.
Sauna drumming session, that'd be a fun class.
I might have just invented a new style of music. But no, and that drum actually, the Achimavu, or something similar to it, went to South America, that we were talking about earlier. And it can also be found in candomblé music, or a relative of it. So I think I'll put that class of drum, I'll pick that out this time.
All right, very cool. We've already gone into it a bit, but can you tell me some technical percussion terms?
You want to know technical percussion terms?
It could be types of rhythm. I've heard you mention some before.
So
different rhythms, tempos, beats, things like that.
I'd say there's a full spectrum because we've been talking a fair bit about the Ghanaian drumming. So the piece I've been looking at recently called Kete, there's about 20 or so like Ketes. They're a suite of pieces, but the one I've been looking at is typically not played very fast actually. But it's not like there's not a technical, there's not like an Italian word that they'll use to let you know that.
Sure, yeah, they're Ghanaian.
Yeah, I mean, you wouldn't just be handed a sheet of paper that says this word means this speed, but they know that piece. That piece is handed down from generation to generation at a certain tempo. But yeah, I mean, if we want to talk about technical terms, I guess tempo is maybe not a bad one to have a quick talk about there. So I mean,
sure.
What is a tempo to you? What does it mean?
Well, I guess that goes back to rhythm and beat. It's the speed of things, I guess. It's based on the temporal, the literal definition of that is time, isn't it?
Time.
Yeah.
Because you could have a tempo that was slow, like a kind of... But if you're subdividing that into 64th notes, is that a faster or slow rhythm then?
I wouldn't know.
It's all relative. So I think that's something I like about rhythm. And we were talking about it being arrhythmic earlier. Is there such a thing as that? So, I mean, if you had a slow tempo and then you're actually placing what might appear to be random notes across it, if you subdivide a note into enough segments, it will be in a rhythm somewhere, won't it? So, I mean, if we're getting technical with tempo, we can actually kind of pull it apart there and just sort of, does it actually mean anything? If the fact that you can subdivide it to infinity, does that...
Sure. To the nth degree.
Yeah.
Sure.
I guess we're not exactly staying on technical words here, but a lot of rhythm is subdividing things. So if we're looking at a series of notes that are placed in a grid of 12, it's really cool to play a pattern of 3 against a pattern of 4, because there will be this kind of contrast and there's going apart and coming together again. So there is a technical word that we're sort of drifting towards here, which is polyrhythm, which of course just means many rhythms, but...
Sure, at once.
Yeah.
Or in one suite.
I guess if you played one rhythm and then another, you could say that was a polyrhythm, couldn't you? But typically what they're talking about when someone says polyrhythm is 2 rhythms at once that fit over the same... They used to call them cross rhythms, but then they said, well, that kind of implies they're working against each other, but they're not. So... the polyrhythms of samba and things like this, the way these rhythms fit together is that they'll be sometimes on different subdivisions. So you're working within one tempo, you might have a rhythm that feels fast, a rhythm that feels slow. Call and answer, the sort of rhythms calling and answering each other within those patterns there. So I think, you didn't ask me to pick one, but I think polyrhythm is going to be the technical percussion word of the day. Yeah,
it's a good term. But also I suppose when it comes to hitting the drum itself, when we were playing music over there, you're talking about the different techniques. You talk about some of them, the techniques of hitting the drum itself, making contact, the slaps and things like that.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of marvelous to me. It's kind of amazing that there's so many different ways of getting a sound.
Yeah, it is just hand on drum, but so much variety.
It's just one piece of material stretched over an aperture. And there's that many tones. There's a wonderful amount of tones and possibility. I think it speaks to sort of the vastness of human creativity, really.
Yeah.
But the hand tones that we were exploring the other day, the simplest, the ones you'd be taught first if you came to a drumming session would be bass, tone, and slap, maybe. But even slap itself, so slap would usually be, the one we were looking at was called a closed slap. So it's a hard sound, and the reverberance of the drum, you don't let the membrane vibrate. So it's kind of, it has no voice. So we were talking about this distinctive tone of each drum. So when you do a closed slap, it's kind of a dead sound. Although having said that, if you do a closed slap on an achimavu, you still get some kind of like subsonic effects going on there. But typically, So you've got this kind of like dead sound, and you can contrast that with a warm, rounded sound called an open, where you strike the drum kind of more softly and you let the resonance happen and the voice comes out. And then the bass tone, you're actually stopping the higher frequency sounds and allowing the bass ones out. But there are so many tones. Like there's an open slap and a closed slap. There is a muted open, which is kind of like a raised, it sounds like up. There's a standard open. There's a bass. Then there's all these different effects you can have of playing nearer the middle or nearer the edge to control the kind of mids.
Sure.
And if you look at a technique if you look at the techniques used in Afro-Cuban music, they adapted barrels into drums that led to congas, and there was just the way that those drums were constructed just allowed them to have these marvelous. They got these techniques where they would kind of like walk a hand. There's always different kind of mute tones. So if your hand's resting on the skin and you slap with the other hand, that sounds different than a slap without the hand.
Sure.
And if you get a kind of bassy sound out of the heel of your hand, or if you're kind of adding these kind of ghost notes which are kind of like mini slaps, you know, all together.
Very intricate.
Yeah, it just adds up to this. All these different ingredients add up to just a really dynamic kind of flavorful experience.
Yeah, and just the technique as well of just, you know, different ways to shape your hand around the drum. That's incredible to me. So fascinating.
And then take all of those different ornate tones that we were talking about and then do a polyrhythm. So there's two people doing a very rich, contrasting rhythm at the same time, two different rhythms. And the way that these rhythms meet and have a conversation, the open tones can be having a conversation.
Yep.
The bass tones can be having a conversation, or they can be in common. And then these little mute tones and everything, it's so intricate. It's drawn me in so much over the years. The intricacies of the polyrhythms. I'm an addict of polyrhythms.
Yeah, it sounds like a bit of a rabbit hole, really. You know, just endlessly fascinating complexities to it.
Absolutely, it absolutely is. And then some people in a more Western tradition, say like Adam Neely, who's a famous YouTuber, or
I know the name.
Jacob Collier. Jacob Collier does this one where he does a 5. He does like his thumb's doing 1, and then his first finger's doing a 2.
Wow,
which is easy. But then he adds in third finger doing a 3, fourth finger doing a 4, and little finger doing a 5. So he's got
skill.
5-part polyrhythm on one hand.
One hand.
Yeah,
and that's like literally like finger drumming when you were a kid.
Yeah,
that's crazy.
And Adam Neely did a bit of a breakdown into polyrhythms. He did because they've got the 7-Eleven stores in America, so he did a 7-Eleven polyrhythm. But you kind of get a bit more scientific, a bit more away from stuff that just sounds good, although it can. I'm not saying it can't sound good, but
you just more into the theory of it, then kind of into the weeds.
Absolutely, yeah. So there's no limit to it, really. How much drawn in you can get.
What was it like to work at Plymouth Music Zone?
So I was thinking about this question because there's a lot to cover.
Would you prefer not to go into it? Or?
No, we can go into it. Make it happen.
All right.
It was a tale of two sides of an organisation because the work...
Often the case.
The work was... so I got to do the leading of workshops in a variety of settings. I went to schools. We mentioned working with asylum seekers and refugees. That was at Plymouth Music Zone. I went to residential older people settings. I worked with just this vast array of different people. And the session you came to, Monday Night Drumming for Anybody, which had a mixture of relatively old and young, and people with disabilities and without disabilities and with mental health stuff or with not. It was for anybody. So all of this amazing work and the philosophy of the place, which I think would be good to talk about, is was amazing, obviously. There's enough time passed, I feel, since happenings. So just to give you a bit of context, Plymouth Music Zone started 25 years ago, I think.
Right.
And at the start of... you may have seen them on the news recently saying they were not sure if they're going to carry on.
Yeah, I saw.
Yeah. So at the start of this year, they sort of said, well, that might be it. We might close in the spring or autumn. So I got another job, and because I didn't, you know what the jobs are like today. It's like, you can't necessarily be sure of getting something, and I just had to go. But what led up to the previous PMZ, which was 10 or so salaried employees and many freelancers, there were things going on that have led to that breaking in a way where they were going to say, okay, we can't continue. And that was kind of painful to be around. Okay, so you're going out, doing music with people, and it's amazing, and you're getting back to something that was not that. It was not reflective of that at that time. So it was like being pulled in half in a very weird way. And like I say, it's not unusual. I've certainly worked in a few different places before. You know, like there's always politics, or there's always differences of opinion in direction. But I feel like it was quite severe at Music Zone. That difference, the tension between what the greatness of the work and the less good things,
the backroom stuff
that were happening, what was going on, and I do wish Plymouth Music Zone the very best, absolutely. And the good news is that they are looking like they're going to carry on for another year or so. So they've got a chance to build something up again. And hopefully the learnings of those 20 plus years of the good stuff can stick and build something really awesome. And I genuinely hope that's the case for them.
Yeah, let's hope so.
But yeah, so if we want to tap into the absolutely positive stuff, like the work was, I would say, excellent. So I mean, like, you experienced one workshop with me. What was your take on that?
Yeah, it was lots of fun. Yeah, it's great to see it being so inclusive. Everyone was involved in their own ways, and that's, one of the reasons why I wanted to have you on and talk to you is, well, again, the universal power of music. And it's great seeing it connect people, seeing people unleash themselves, express themselves, all that kind of stuff. It was very inspiring to me, and just very interesting that drumming more than anything else can achieve that. Stringed instruments, you could easily make a horrible racket. Drumming, it's much more primal. It's just your hands. Everyone can do it.
You can make a horrible racket with drums too.
You can. But it's much easier with a string instrument.
But I mean, like, I think what you're touching on there is the fact that rhythm is my main thing. Although I was taking a guitar to the older people's home and we were singing songs together. So it's not like the only thing I would do, but it's very accessible. Like, the chances are, if you meet someone, they can probably hit a drum. If they can't hit a drum, you might be able to find a way that they can trigger a sound or just be part of it. It does, as you say, the inclusivity, absolutely. So rhythmic-based things have that advantage there that you can really just hopefully not feel intimidated as well. I feel like in this country, a lot of people would be like, "Oh, I can't really play that." I do that. I've got a guitar with me today. I'm going to use it later for some professional work. But I will say I'm not a guitarist, which is, I don't know.
There's a caveat. There you go.
I don't know if it's healthy, but rhythm, I think, I'd like to think people will be more inclined to hit a drum. But Plymouth Music Zone has run ukulele groups, it's run guitar clubs, youth band work, all kinds of different ensembles like classical music, things like this. We've had Plymouth Music Zone's got a connection to the Orchestra of the Age of Enlightenment, who are this cool orchestra from the other side of the country who play like old-fashioned, like truly old-fashioned, like chamber music with the actual instruments from the, if not the actual ones that like are
replicas.
made.
Yeah, sure.
So there's this whole spectrum of stuff, and the creativity side of it was kind of central. Like get people creating, as you say, get them expressing themselves. Like even if it's in a small way or a big way, you can help people compose an entire piece of music, or just get them to, as we were doing, like a call and response, just get somebody to come up with one rhythm. It may even be just one note, but they get to choose. They get some control there. But I mean, yeah, who would you think Music Zone would be for, if you, like, off the top of your head?
I would think it would serve the most value for people who otherwise might find it hard to join in with groups, or might find it hard to find classes or workshops that allow them to express themselves in a place of zero judgment and come together just to be together. In an environment of zero judgment or very little judgment, and free and open and fundamentally fun. I would say those are all when I was, I went there because it's a local thing to me. I thought I've got to go and check it out.
Yeah.
It'll be cool. And then met you, which is fantastic. But I just went along because it's a local thing. And then I was very glad to see, inspired by just seeing people with, could be disabilities or certain conditions or mental health issues or whatever it might be, come together into an arena of freedom, I guess. Just a fun laboratory to make some sounds together.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's what's great to see for me.
Because Plymouth Music Zone kind of positioned itself. Some people would say, "Are you doing music therapy?" And they would say, "Absolutely not," because music therapy comes with all these specific
criteria,
qualifications you need.
Oh, right, yeah.
You have to be certified, I believe, or you have to be. If you're actually providing care, it's like everything has to be documented, doesn't it? And things like that. You have to be under scrutiny. Monitored, certificated. That's not a word, is it?
Certified.
You have to be all these things, and it was like, no, we're not doing that. Which I think it's fair enough. But the main mission of it is to help people, and it doesn't matter if that is because of a reason or just imagine the average person who has no problems in their life could come and make connections and have their life improved. It's about improving lives of everybody. And personally, like, I think my life has been improved 100-fold, millionfold. I don't know, get too exaggerating, but significantly, hugely, by meeting all these different people and learning from them, just connecting to them. And it, as I said, it doesn't matter if it's somebody who needs help, because that can be very rewarding. If you're able to give somebody, as you say, judgment-free space where they can self-express. If they feel better, you just feel like you're walking on air. It's amazing.
Most definitely.
That you can be like, I held the space for that person. Or the things that people tell you, like that it's the highlight of their week, or, you know, like just finding out about other people's lives and existences has been so eye-opening. And I think it's increased my empathy so much.
I can see how, because also you're seeing the beauty of people, aren't you? You're seeing the rhythm, you're seeing the creativity, the imagination, the rhythm, you know, the music in people.
Yeah.
That's just a fundamentally beautiful thing.
And is there anything, like, fundamentally, like, what is, if you want to break down human connection to its simplest things, what is it? Relating to other people, being included. It's just so it's basic stuff that I feel like a lot of the time in modern life we don't get to do.
It was being seen and being heard as well. You get a chance to have both those things with the Music Zone. Yeah, literally.
And I mean, I guess some of the perspectives of people who come might be easier to understand. Like, but I mean, I had no idea. But I'm going to take an example of someone who their life they've got, I think it's autism. But it doesn't matter what they've got in a way. They live in a sort of, they've got a support person who's with them 24/7. They live in a special residence, like not a normal house. So that person's entire week is basically occasional appointments, such as going to Plymouth Music Zone, probably medical appointments, maybe family visits, but it's all managed. It's all like, what's it like living in a like school but 24/7 or something?
Yeah,
you know?
very
like,
curated.
What is that person's, like, I didn't really know what it would be like to live in that person's shoes. And then when their life is able to, like the Venn diagram of their life is able to cross over with other people's, and they can be seen by other people as a valuable member of that group. Yeah. They can provide maybe a laugh if they do something fun, or something profound if they're sort of adding in something really cool to a rhythm, but they are seen and valued equally as to anybody else, and the importance of that to them is vast. And I just wouldn't have known before. I just didn't know what people's lives were like.
Or you wouldn't unless you went into those waters, would you?
No. And similarly with the older people work, I'd never really spent any time in an older people's, you know, residential setting. I didn't know what that was like. And it's, you know, you might drift in and drift out, and well, they've got a big TV there in the lounge, but you know, a lot of people they don't leave their rooms in those places. No. But then if you've given, by visiting, giving the opportunity, you get some, like, you can see the life kind of energy coming back when people get talking about the music they love, or they get singing and memories are coming back to them, or they get a chance to be creative. And again, we're talking about agency. I think one commonality with some of the groups that I've worked with is they don't have agency. Whereas in a music session, you can give them agency. You can say, right, we're gonna compose this piece, and then you can actually like get something from any individual. Their contribution can be valued. Yeah, it's powerful stuff. Whereas going back to the sort of a typical older people's residence, that they get medical appointments like forced on them, prescriptions, meetings. It's just, you know, how much do they get to do what they really want to do? And the environment's very closed. Yeah. Heavily routine based. Absolutely. And it was hard. Like, some of that older people's work was really hard because your session was constantly interrupted by prescriptions or appointments or people. You know, the treatment of people was, like, we saw a whole spectrum of people being treated well and people being actually treated less well. Yeah, it was quite hard to see. But what you knew you could do, what you could come in with, was energy, creativity, acceptance, valuing, listening, and forging those connections where people who wouldn't have met each other, even if they lived in the same residence, they might not have actually interacted. Because it's a bit like I was talking about the sort of everyday. How many everyday people do you interact with when you walk along the street? Like, we don't really do that in this country, do we? It's like,
yep.
Who would you talk to? Like, how do you get talking to people? And music is
a gateway.
Absolutely.
Do you think music is a healing tool?
There's been various studies about music and its impact on people's health. So I would say that there are certainly things that music can influence, and those things may have. I mean, let's take for instance purpose. The purpose that it can give you if you've got a little community. Or use my Monday night drumming as an example.
Sure.
That person, when they come to that session, they have a purpose. They are amongst people who mutually respect each other. Maybe they catch up on their lives in a bit of chatter, or they get to be part of something together. They have a connection. They have a purpose. That can be huge because, they think people live longer if they've got a purpose. Be that, I think there's a famous study about religions where people who go to church, who go to church will live longer. And it's thought that may be to do with purpose and community. But I feel like when somebody's coming out of their house residence,
routine,
they're coming out of their routine. They're coming to do something that's engaging, and nothing uses more of the brain at once than music.
Right.
That has got. Imagine the positive implications of that versus just staying at home with no agency.
Yeah, doing the same old thing.
Or another example of a group of people that come to Plymouth Music sometimes, maybe that they aren't currently in work. And maybe that's kind of building up all these feelings. What would it be like if you're getting pressured to work by the authorities, or, how do you get out of that? Like, and the negative effects of being locked in something negative versus taking part in something, getting out, using your creativity, building connections.
Well, again, agency, right?
Agency.
Yeah.
So I wouldn't necessarily say healing, although what are we healing? If you were healing somebody's lack of agency, if you were healing somebody's, if they were down in a rut and music helped them out, maybe that'd be healing.
Well, yeah, you could say it could heal someone's soul, right?
I think so.
Or psyche, you could say that.
You could definitely. I think you could put forward a very good argument to say that music can absolutely bring somebody up. Yeah,
well, it sounds like you've witnessed some of that. You've witnessed healing events, people being healed in front of your eyes.
Yeah, I mean, there's a famous within the organisation, not famous beyond it. I just you get so locked into your little institutions. Don't you?
Sure.
There was a participant at Plymouth Music Zone who was electively mute.
Mute?
Yeah, so like he could speak, but he stopped speaking. Something happened in his life, stopped speaking.
All right.
And then the family tried a lot of things, and then eventually came to Plymouth Music Zone and took part in the sessions for a number of years, and then suddenly just started talking to someone at Plymouth Music Zone, another facilitator.
Incredible.
And then just built up, and then that person is in bands. They've grown up now, and
that's profound.
Was it Plymouth Music Zone?
Could be a combination of things, but I imagine music certainly helped.
There was, the family certainly put it on Music Zone, and I think the individual attributed it to Music Zone. So I mean, yeah, in that sense, it can heal. But if you had some physical, I mean, would suspect that there's a chance music could help with pain if someone was in pain. But I mean, if you actually,
that's going back to almost sound therapy, isn't it? That's that kind of different area.
Yeah, so I don't know how that works, and in a similar way to I don't know how music therapy works, but I think to a degree, music can be very likely to. You could probably say it would be healing.
Sure, I've had some friends who have had music therapy. Again, that's a separate field. Someone else would probably have to talk to at some point. But friends who've experienced music therapy and have got great results through it. So, but then some is art therapy. So again, that's about which field of therapy fits the individual. Why is drumming so satisfying?
Why is it so? You know, have you heard of the drummer's high?
No.
So we're going back to another study here. Where there's a measurable effect, kind of euphoric, elevated heartbeat, elevated mood from drumming, called drummer's high.
From reaching that rhythm?
Yeah, from playing rhythm and together with other people. You actually get an actual measurable high.
Interesting.
What was the question? That's gone straight out of my mind. Sorry.
It's cool. Why is drumming so satisfying?
Why is it so satisfying? So you get a high. You get an actual hit from drumming, like an actual natural high in your brain. Chemicals are released, endorphins. Who knows what? You talk to a scientist to find out what, but you actually get a high from it. I would argue that there's other areas of satisfaction. So I talked earlier about my trying to understand the swing of a foreign type of music, and that took ages, and I got it eventually to a degree. Obviously, there's like a whole spectrum there of like the absolute top.
You're only halfway down the rabbit hole.
Yeah,
full way.
And like for my personal journey in music has been like I've got terrible short-term memory, as I just proved by forgetting the question immediately. But no, I'm actually dyslexic, which is be a surprise to probably 0 people. A musician is dyslexic. It's very common. Dyslexia is very common in the arts, isn't it? But my particular manifestation of it is awful short-term memory. So when I was first trying to learn these West African drumming patterns, even if they're like one comes to mind, okay, it's very short. It's 3 notes and then 2 notes. It just goes da 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 da. That's the pattern. I could not retain it. It was just like it was like water through a sieve.
Right. I
just couldn't hold it. And then trying to hold that and then listen to something else at the same time felt like nearly impossible. Or trying to remember, as we were talking about those drumming strokes, we were talking about slaps and opens and basses and things like this. Now trying to imagine learning 10 distinct tones in a sequence, in a rhythm that fit against that bell pattern that I just mentioned there, that little da, 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 da. That was almost insurmountable for me. But I did it. And that was satisfying. And it was been my own like personal, I don't know if I really set out for it, but something about it grabbed me where it was like, this is nearly impossible for me to actually do, but I really like it.
So that's a technical challenge then?
Yeah. Yes. And that journey that I was on there, from not being able to remember what is essentially an extremely simple pattern, I don't want to put any sort of judgment into what somebody might find difficult or easy, or what's valuable or what's not.
But for you, yeah.
Yeah, that clave pattern that I just mentioned there, that 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, that was really hard at the beginning. And now I've learned and can play and teach polyrhythms significantly more complicated than that. So I can actually sing one pattern and play another.
Wow.
Of a polyrhythm, or when I'm teaching a group, I'll actually be keeping track of 2 or 3 rhythms at once, whilst playing something myself that's different, checking that it's all locking together.
Is part of that simply muscle memory? Is that how you programmed yourself?
Yeah,
just doing it and then clicked in.
I mean, I'm not sure we're entirely sure how the brain works, but when you're first learning the pattern, you probably are using like your vocal. I mean, it's quite often taught with vocal patterns. So that one I just mentioned, if you went 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, you're using words there.
Yeah.
And the words are helping you. You know it's a 3-2. So you can use a little chunk of your memory to be like, it's a pattern of 3 notes and then 2. And then actually playing it, you can be like 1, 2. You can count it out. But then you're using like a lot of your RAM. Your brain's like RAM.
Sure. Yeah.
And so like when you get used to that, you don't have to use the verbal bit anymore. So you can actually free up that RAM for something else.
So the rhythm is internalized.
Yeah, you do put that into your muscles indeed. So it's like walking. That's what my teacher used to liken it to. He said, you don't think about walking and talking at the same time. So when you get to have played a rhythm enough times for long enough that it doesn't use that part of your RAM, then you can play a rhythm and talk at the same time, which seemed impossible when I was learning.
Yeah.
And I can do it now. So for
Very
me,
cool.
The satisfaction of drumming has been that technical challenge. Definitely in part, because that has been an epic journey for myself.
Your Everest.
Yeah, my absolute weakness has been turned into a strength. And
fantastic.
I'm not sure if I would have stuck with. I'm not sure if it was the challenge that made it something I stuck at, because people who could just get it quicker, maybe that was less satisfying to them. Maybe they wouldn't have maybe they wouldn't have gone as far down a rabbit hole.
That's kind of an eternal human question you're on there.
Yeah. So I can't really say for sure. There's magic when a polyrhythm comes together, and you're relying on the other players in the group when that happens as well. So you can't just play your side of the polyrhythm. If the other person changes speed by 5% and you don't adjust to them, the whole thing's going to fall apart.
Yeah.
Which I guess makes it like the potential to go wrong means you have to trust each other. And maybe that's part of the satisfaction of drumming too, that you have to trust your other players. You have to be in tune with them. It's like a trust exercise.
Sure, but if also you take the idea that everyone does have rhythm at some level, there's a primal aspect to it. You know, the idea of jungle drums, or, you know, that quote, drums in the deep. You know, the drum has to be one of the most ancient instruments out there, I would imagine. So does it connect us to almost the inner caveman, the inner ancestor almost? And again, when you're sharing rhythms and you're communicating with drums in different rhythms, is that part of the appeal too, I wonder?
Well, there's talk about whether music preceded language, isn't there?
Sure. Yeah, that kind of thing, basically. You know,
like, and as I was saying about the language barrier with the people who I couldn't speak English easily to, you can make music effortlessly with them. Yeah, I think there probably is something deep about a rhythm, isn't there? Probably. As we said, it was part of us with our brainwaves and our heartbeats and our circadian rhythm. In a way, is a kind of rhythm, isn't it? You know, it's a little microcosm of humanity, a rhythm, isn't it? You know, we are rhythm. We're in rhythms. We're made up of rhythms. You know, I think it's macro and micro scale. You know, it's all there, isn't it?
Yeah. Well, again, it's going back to, in a deeper, more cosmic way, it goes back to the idea of time. How are we all manipulating time? You know, the super macro thing is the universe, where time and space doesn't really matter anymore, but you boil it right back down to, say, Plymouth Music Zone. It's how do we each manipulate time and have fun with time in this space together. And the joy of it, you know, how do you disrupt time? How do you control time? I don't know. That's more intricate, that idea of where I'm going with that, but I think that's maybe part of it.
Well, no, you're absolutely right. Like, time together is so important. And you get that there whilst you're subdividing time into all kinds of complex polyrhythms.
Yeah, I don't know. That's a deep thing to go into, but I think there's something in there.
Yeah.
Well, for my last question, if you could go to any 3 periods of history, anywhere in the world, and join in the drumming scene, which would they be?
3 periods in history?
Yeah, all places, you know, times and places.
All right. I would definitely want to go and see Ghana before modernization, because when I went out there, it was roads, mobile phones, and there was still spectacular music occurring, but the world had changed a lot. I want to see the music from 1950s or before. You know, like when there was less of a cultural shift had happened. I want to see some of the kind of the different forms that would take, and obviously, like, I wish I could live like 100 lifetimes to go through all these different places.
You've got to pick 3. Oh, no. You got Ghana.
Yeah, I'll go to Ghana. Ghana in the 1950s.
Somewhere in South America.
See, I have been to Rio, and I saw some spectacular samba out there. And we're talking about time periods now.
Sure.
There was a lot of mixing going on in Brazil, and the older records of Brazilian music are spectacular. But I think I'll go somewhere else. I want to go South Indian classical music, and that could be any time. That's time. I wouldn't mind when that was, but should we just say 100 years ago, just to see what was going on, just out of curiosity.
Why that? Just because the sheer intricacy of it and the complexity?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's Indian classical music is such an art. Like one of my ethnomusicology teachers, he'd been out there and learned some, and he played us this tape, and it's something that's really stuck with me through all the years of these musicians warming up. So there's this drone instrument that comes in, you know, the very you'd instantly
I know what you mean. I don't know what it's called.
No, I can't remember either. I can't remember. But then one of the players is speaking the polyrhythms. So instead of like playing it on a drum, open tone. He's singing the tones from it.
Fascinating.
Some guy's playing a pot. There's this pot in India you can like raise and lower it to get these different tones out of it, and the sheer like intricacy of it, the arts and craft, like the artsmanship of it is so stunning. I'd love to spend a lifetime. I'm doing lifetimes apparently.
That's cool.
100 lifetimes in Ghana and nearby countries, and then definitely if you
South India,
definitely a few lifetimes in South India, and what's another?
Yeah, got to pick a third one. Where else? Could be something somewhere in Asia.
I want to go to Mongolia.
Interesting.
Because I have
during the time of the Khan to see how crazy that would be.
I heard they killed 10% of the world population in that period.
I know they affected the carbon footprint of the world, which is quite impressive.
So I'm not going to do that. No, I'll go there now today.
Unless you're Genghis Khan's drummer, that'd be quite. If you're that guy, you're having a fun time.
It's probably a little bit worrying still. I don't know.
never safe. But no, you're going to Mongolia now.
But no, I've experienced. Yeah, because there's a.
I've heard some Mongolian music, and it is very cool.
I love this. There's this big string, like it's like a violin, but the strings are thicker. It's got 2 strings instead of like violin's got 4. Playing 5
big long thing.
Violin under there. They bow this thing. It's quite. Looks,
as long as a bass almost. Then
looks quite sizable.
Right.
It just sounds amazing, and I love what they do with their voice. Like I have.
Yeah, what's it called? Not yodeling, is it? Throat singing.
Throat singing and overtone singing. So I've experimented with these, and I have great fun. So I'd love to do that properly. So lifetime in Mongolia.
All right, sounds fun.
Yeah.
Well, thank you, Rob. Great to talk to you.
Well, thank you, Sam.
Thanks for listening. Please like, subscribe, rate, comment, share, all that good business. And stay tuned for more fantastic interviews with brilliant guests. There's a seat waiting for you.